So there I was, contemplating how I could traverse the catacombs of Paris on a dirt bike with a cottonelle decal and a Paul Revere lantern hanging off the handle when I realized that making a Spider-Man 4 movie might be more complicated than I initially thought. My last video only touched on a single character and merely dipped a pinky into the abyss that is the potential for Peter Parker's future arcs and journeys. Since then, I've decided to smack around my best friend, who's a resident Spidey nerd in my town, to help me paint some kind of a roadmap for the direction I'd like to see Tom Holland's Spider-Man traverse. With so many different opinions and stories surrounding the character of Spider-Man, it can be troublesome to capitalize on what No Way Home has done for our boy, Peter Piper Parker. They've essentially left us with a Spider-Man that truly doesn't need any further storytelling about his origin, which means we can focus solely on his future. No need to try and introduce a late explanation for the absence of an Uncle Ben, a Harry Osborn, or his parents. Topics that have been done and covered in previous Spider-Man movies. We simply have a Spider-Man that is beginning an arc where many others have been before, fresh off of a tragedy and right after a life-defining boss battle. While I am no stranger to how this typically plays out, I want to take a step back to look at the grand scheme of things in an effort to make sense of what direction I believe would suit the current state of MCU Spider-Man. By no means am I the defining model of a Spider-Man film critic, nor am I a world builder Kevin Feige Jr., aka the Hawk Feige, but my love for a worthwhile Spider-Man story does come from a place of compassion and genuineness. So if you don't like what I have to say, that's completely fair, and I encourage you to treat this video's comment section as an opportunity to voice some things you want to see happen or addressed in this next chain of Spider-Man blockbusters. To understand my perspective on Spider-Man, I need you to look through the same lens that I see him through. Contrary to popular belief, I am not an edgelord who wants to see the world burn solely for the warmth that basking in my own piss usually provides. I am simply a man that enjoys a good story with some kind of adversity that our MC has to endure and overcome. Sure, it can be as simple as the protagonist facing off against some villain and the adversity lies only in having to beat said villain. But that's a little oversimplified for my liking. That's not to say a villain so difficult to beat can't be a good arc for the hero, because there is a good argument to be made that pushing one's boundaries and limits can be an arc in itself. Shit, anime lives and dies by these types of arcs anyways. Now, am I asking for another complex villain like Ozymandias or another sheer force of nature like Anton Chigurh? Of course not. Now, don't get me wrong, I would love to see a wicked villain like that in a Spider-Man movie, but I digress. Having a plot where the hero has to defeat the villain doesn't always make for an interesting arc to the character. To me, having a hero endure, reflect, and display an utmost case of resolve is where I would typically start in terms of a solid foundation for a decent arc. For me to consider an arc great, it would have to be able to make me, aka the audience, question or ponder the decisions and moral dilemmas that the hero is facing. The more relatable or empathetic the hero can make me feel, the more it feels as if I have a front row seat to the shit show, right alongside our hero. Having grounded or semi-realistic takes and elements in fiction is the sole reason why I love these comic book stories well into my mid-20s. If not for these elements, I would simply show up to the movie to be merely entertained and lost in the art. But I believe we should ask for more than just a piece of entertainment. Spider-Man has proven to me time and time again why he is one of the most relatable and inspiring superheroes to this day. Throughout different periods of my life, I've watched many depictions of the Wallcrawler tell us a story that I wasn't always able to understand or relate to. But at this stage in my complicated maze of a brain, I've found passion in storytelling and compulsive fascination in characters that seem to be all the more relatable than I once thought. All I can hope for is that moving forward in any realm of storytelling, we continue to see characters that tell us something about ourselves or leave us questioning the moral complexities in what we define as a hero. Let's manage some expectations here in terms of the tone. Look, I'm not here to get off on a 2-hour Peter Parker torture session like some kind of a sadist or weird romance fan fiction piece, but to say that Peter Parker has suffered enough is kind of a fucking stupid argument to be made. I mean, if he's not in the trenches dealing with something, then you might as well just ask for Far From Home's copy and paste. Or better yet, the majority of Phase 4 Marvel writing. I'm not fucking asking for someone to slaughter Peter's entire family and friends in front of him while they have him tied up to a porta potty dangling from a skyscraper. But you gotta work with me a little. Spider-Man has a pretty tragic life. Time and time again, the writers love throwing Peter into turmoil and darkness where he gets the absolute brakes beat off of him. Now, do I agree with the writers just making Peter Parker the most miserable man in Marvel? Of course not. But out of that despair, I can see the silver lining that as a hero, he endures way more than any other person should or could. But at the end of the day, he always gets back up with an attitude that I can only aspire to strive for. To me, Spider-Man is interesting because he intrigues me in the level of the man and not so much the level of the spider. He embodies every aspect of being a man and takes on a major responsibility simply because it has become his duty to wield his powers for good. The very foundations that his aunt and uncle have instilled into him. Peter wakes up every day, knows his purpose is to be Spider-Man. And as much as people rely on Peter Parker, he knows his duty and responsibility to the people of New York rules over all else, which often leads him to make sacrifices for the greater good, even if the consequences might hurt him and his loved ones. As corny and played out as it all sounds, it's the exact reason why I love the character. And bro, the formula still fucking works. The relatability of sacrificing what you love in order to do what's right is what's allowed me to grow with Peter as I've gotten older. So for that reason, I have to admit that I want another Spider-Man story that has some serious stakes and isn't just this.
Gifts. As is tradition. Darren?
Surprised to see me?
You're really starting to annoy me.
Alright, let's get a few things out of the way. Peter Parker's mindset is a question I need answered. Are we going to expand on how he's bearing this new weight of being truly alone, or are we going to forget about it and just pretend everything is sunshine and rainbows? This brings me back to my original topic of if we were going to get an arc for the character outside of just fighting a cool villain. Finding a good balance between something grounded, yet fun and inspiring is something I can't imagine is easy to create. Go too hard on the dark and gritty realism and you get accused of being an edgelord, and being too fun and whimsical makes the whole experience feel like it has zero weight, and I might as well just be at Disneyland. In my last video, I touched on how Peter Parker's mindset is truly untapped potential. I don't only say that for the sake of compelling storytelling, but I say it for something I think the majority of us can agree on. Peter's current mindset works perfectly for the symbiote. In my opinion, the symbiote works best when it's a drug to Peter's ego. It fuels his vanity and exploits some of the most vulnerable feelings and impulses that we keep locked away. If we take a look at where Peter is at the end of No Way Home, you could argue that there are many unresolved sentiments and mindsets that are potentially left open-ended to expand on further down the road to possibly pursue new arcs and storylines. Therefore, to me, the symbiote would be the bee's fucking knees in this next chapter of Spider-Man storytelling. And after thinking it over, I've come to the conclusion that I really want the symbiote in more than one film. Not just a single movie where it comes and goes all in the same film. I want the symbiote to set up its own movie in a way where it's potentially the villain on its own, and all other characters are just fuel to the conflict or something to help Peter learn something about himself. An example could be the symbiote helping and aiding Peter in his conflict to defeat a villain, but as fans we would know that this newfound power will soon set in its side effects on Peter Parker throughout this conflict and arc. I would have the movie end on a note of caution, and not necessarily be satisfying by any traditional means like him swinging through New York all high and proud. I do this to hammer in the idea that the audience shouldn't like Peter Parker at the end of the movie. Or better yet, they shouldn't like the direction he's heading in. But don't worry, the next movie would resolve all that, so chill the fuck out and let me have my fun. Now take all this. This is where things can get a little complicated, as if they weren't already. I'm also very torn on what direction we are heading for with this villain, as well as the tone that this villain will cast upon the entire movie. The main questions I have are we keeping it semi-grounded, or are we flying off the goddamn rails like the Guardians of the Galaxy ride at Disneyland? For a semi-grounded approach, I think of someone like the Kingpin, which honestly I wouldn't mind as a villain at all. Seeing what he put Matt Murdock through on Daredevil really sold me on him being a great villain. With plenty of deception, corruption, twists and turns, it could honestly work in our favor due to the upcoming Daredevil series that's set to come out next year. Or this year, I don't remember. Personally, I would love to see Kingpin's web of lies and conspiracy stacked against Matt and Peter as a connecting plot between a TV show and movie, but I need to marinate that one a little bit longer. There's also the possibility of something in the middle of grounded and fucking wacky, which is connecting the upcoming Craven movie to Tom Holland's Spider-Man. Look, I don't really want to get into the recent trend of villains and anti-heroes getting their own movies that take place in their own universe, but also kind of don't take place in their own universe, but I'll go ahead and say it. Fuck a movie about Craven. I could give a shit if you want that solo movie. I want him first and foremost in a Spider-Man movie. Yeah, I know I'll probably eat shit when that movie turns out to be good for once, but hear me out. They just dropped a Craven trailer after I wrote this, and I'm pretty fucking sure it's going to be ass, so I'm not worried about me being wrong here. A decent redeeming quality seems like the violence will be pretty intense, and Aaron Taylor Johnson is pretty cool. That's all I gotta say. But yeah, that's the only positive thing I like. Anyways, I'm a fucking Spider-Man fan. I want to see Craven in a Spider-Man movie with him as the goddamn villain. Insomniac Spider-Man 2 dropped a fat trailer on us with Craven as the main villain and the symbiote all in one. So I'm also super conflicted as to whether any of this makes sense for us to do with the same premise that's in Spider-Man 4. I mean, that's not the exact way I want to see it done, but the main ingredients are there. I know everyone, including myself, wants a Craven's Last Hunt, but at this point I have to believe that there are other routes for Spider-Man 4. Could you imagine if at the end of the Craven movie, they were to show him going after Spider-Man, but it's actually Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man as the one he wants? Holy shit. Alright, let's move on before I fucking shit myself with inspiration. Onward. Who I'd love to see as a villain in one of the next 3 movies is the Chameleon. The depths this villain could drag Peter to is insane. The sheer abilities he possesses are intense and can really make for some stellar writing if handled correctly. For me, I'd love to see him when Spider-Man is much more established in his career and has a stark presence in the world. I know you caught that. It would make it hit a lot harder when the chameleon tries to ruin all of that hard work Peter has endured and overcome. So maybe not the best pick for Spider-Man 4, but definitely don't sleep on it. To be honest, a villain that I can't get out of my head is the Hobgoblin. I know he's been talked to death with this whole Ned becoming Hobgoblin hogwash, but there's this angle I've been stuck on that could potentially bloom into something substantial, which is that Peter almost killed the Green Goblin, seconds before being stopped by Tobey's Spider-Man. I would argue that Tom's Peter is still yet to stop himself from crossing that line from his own willpower. You could treat the Hobgoblin like a ghost coming back to haunt him, so to say. I think if he tapped into the mindset of where Peter is currently with his loss of Aunt May, and tossed in this new Goblin character into his life, the disarray and moral dilemmas would sell itself. I think this angle needs to be fleshed out a little further, and I'll definitely make something more concrete on this topic. Look, as much as pitching fanfiction is fun, I need you to understand the magnitude of writing something like Spider-Man 4. I plan on writing it, but this isn't just some kind of fan service galore fest. Typically, a lot of these fanfics play out to be super predictable, not structured well for a film, or entirely made for film, and not so much the comic book backbone. And they kind of just stuff your belly full of everything you want, like an all-you-can-eat buffet. And much like a buffet, you can really fill yourself up before you even get to the good stuff, or attempting to try something new. That's why you allow someone like me, the Chef Diesel, to curate and serve you up a signature dish like a Tell's Kitchen. Shit, a lot of you are already as harsh a critic as Gordon Ramsay, so it'll be perfect. I serve the purpose of presenting you something semi-familiar while showcasing new ideas that sound potentially atrocious at first and end up being tangibly magical. Alright, long pun aside, by the way, I just dropped bars.
First of all, I'm not a rapper.
I fucking killed that buffet and restaurant analogy. I'm gonna try to make Spider-Man 4 the best way I can by combining aspects of film, comics, and fan service to make something possibly rad. Because if left to my own devices of fan fiction, I could definitely do something wild like cast myself as Peter Parker. And just the other day, Sony actually came bitching about replacing Tom Holland. They came to me, of all people. But instead, I decided my calling was to make YouTube videos and battle severe writer's block for months at a time as I entered a state of depression, as well as gain inspiration from my plethora of comic books I own and rewatching my VHS Spider-Man Hobgoblin special. Anyways, the next Spider-Man video I make will be a If I Wrote Spider-Man 4, which I intend to make with my best friends, so be ready for that. But until then, I have plenty of video topics I want to cover, so be sure to stick around for those. Catch you on the next one. Thanks. Also, sorry this took so long. I wasn't lying about the writer's block. Have a good one. You see a teenager call himself Spider-Man. Realistically, he's like Spider-Boy or Spider-Teen. They call himself Spider-Man. It's almost like he knows one day he has to be the man to the spider, even though right now he's just a boy, he's just a teen, prepubescent teen. I don't even think he can grow hair yet, but it doesn't matter because eventually he will become the Spider-Man.
I don't make no moves unless my heart is in it. Everything had changed when my mind started shifting. It's always up to you and that's from start to finish. They don't want to see you win cause that's just hard to win.